my name is Miranda and welcome to January wrap-up, first of the year. So in January I read 7 books, I think, which is pretty damn good for me. Some of them were good, so we're going to chat about them. So the first book I finished this year was The Beholders by Hester and Musson. This is a proof copy, but the actual cover looks completely different to this. So I probably will just put a picture up here because holding this up is not particularly helpful. But yeah, it is proof. Thank you, publishers. So Beholders is a debut historical kind of mystery novel about primarily a servant called Harriet. You mostly follow her diary. It's kind of set in like the 18 something 50s or something, and yeah, you mostly follow her diary as she is employed at a big grand house with secrets and mysteries. So Harriet kind of develops a sort of fascination, obsession with the mistress of the house, and they develop a kind of relationship, mostly like a sort of intense friendship, I would say, but it's kind of exacerbated by the fact that Harriet is also trying to look for answers to all of the weird goings on in the house. So I wouldn't exactly describe this as like a thriller, because there's quite a lot of setup and sort of atmosphere building, which wasn't particularly successful for me. It's the kind of book that is like trying to be all like, you know, vibey and historical and mysterious, and you really, for that to work, need exceptional writing. And I have read many a book now where they're trying to do that and the writing is just not good enough for it to rely on that, including another book that I'll mention later on. But yeah, it's just like the plot is interesting enough and the plot kind of kept me going, like I wanted to know what was happening, and I kind of cared about the characters, but it didn't like really hook me. And I liked where the story went. I thought it was kind of original and interesting, but it didn't like it just didn't grab me as much as I was hoping it would, and it didn't make up for that by then being beautifully written, or like, you know, amazingly atmospheric or anything. It was just kind of fine. I liked it, I enjoyed it while I was reading, but it's really not very memorable. Then I read Gwen and Arthur Not in Love by Lex Cratcher. This I did really love. So this is a kind of medieval YA romance. It's basically about these two young people called Gwendolyn and Arthur who are who've been betrothed to be married since they were a kid, since they were one single kid, but they really don't like each other. Arthur turns up for the summer because there's a tournament going on and they have to kind of, you know, they're going to be married soon, and some kind of like convoluted fake dating esque thing happens because they are both gay and both into different people who are around, and they're kind of hiding that while also trying to fool everyone into thinking that they're getting along and are happily engaged. It was just a really fun time. Like, it's been quite a while since I've read a book that was actually funny, like actually made me laugh, and this really did. Like, the dialogue is so good. The characters are also adorable, and really go on a journey, all of them, and you really get to know them, which I loved. It is maybe a little bit oddly paced, because there's quite a lot of again, setting up at the beginning, which needs to be done. Like, you need to understand who these people are, what their relationships are, and I really did love that. But then it kind of feels like plot starts kicking in about like 3/4 of the way in, and you're like, oh wow, okay, now we're like going headlong into like proper plot place, which is fine. Like, that's a difficult kind of thing to balance, and I think it was done well. But I did notice, like, you know, oh okay, this is the character development section and the kind of like exploring who these people are and getting to know them, and then this is the plot bit. But I still enjoyed myself very much, and I think this is a really yeah, just a really fun time. So if you're in the mood for something kind of light and funny, but also something that has a good story about like found family. Yeah, it's about like a group of young queer people whose struggles are partly to do with them being queer, but also not entirely. Like there's other stuff going on in their lives, which made it really layered, I think. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Then I read Old God's Time by Sebastian Barry. I listened to this on audiobook. I don't know why, just on a whim. And I really enjoyed it. It's about a newly retired policeman in Ireland who is living on his own and kind of just happy with his very quiet, you know, not exciting life. And then two younger policemen come and knock on his door one night and basically say that they need help with an old case that he was involved in. And it moves very slowly. It's very much a character-driven book where you fully get into this character's head, and to the extent where you don't entirely know what's going on some of the time, as in like you don't know what's real and what's not, and it, you know, you get like a lot of his memories and information about his family and his past. I love listening to the audiobook. I found like that being in the character's head and being in his like thoughts worked really well with the audio, and it was just a really moving emotional read about love and family, and a lot of it is about abuse as well. Be aware going into this that there is quite a lot about sexual abuse of children, and I mean personally I thought it was done like very sensitively, and it made me incredibly emotional, and yeah, I thought this was like a really beautiful quiet story, and I do really want to reread it actually physically, and kind of, you know, properly delve into all of the you know, beautiful writing on a sentence level, because I you know, I felt like some of that was a bit lost on audio, but overall really loved it. Smith, I got this from the library, and I really enjoyed it. I have only read one other Zadie Smith, which was The Fraud, which is her most recent book, which I liked but I didn't love. But White Teeth I really enjoyed, and it's such an impressive, I mean, book full stop, but like debut novel, madness. So it basically follows two families living in London in the kind of, well, across the sort of 1970s to the 1990s mostly, but it does stretch back a lot further than that as well, and it looks at kind of the precursors, like the pre-generations to the family that you're mainly focusing on, and there's just so much to this book. It's incredibly funny. There's so many sort of one-liners and like fun, witty things, witticisms, that's what they're called, and yeah, just like funny observations about characters, but also like the characters and the story are, it's all kind of ridiculous and absurd. A lot of it is very silly and very exaggerated, but in that exaggeration it feels incredibly real, and that balance of creating characters who are almost caricatures and are so exaggerated as to feel incredibly real and incredibly relatable, and like, you know, these people because you have encountered them and you are them, and that was just really cleverly done, and I loved getting to know all of these so many different characters. And as soon as I started it, I just felt incredibly comfortable in Zadie Smith's writing. Like it felt like she knew exactly what she was doing, and like you could just kind of relax. And that's kind of what I mean when I say like it's an amazing debut. It's just like, it feels like it's the work of a very accomplished writer, a very confident writer who knows exactly what they're doing. There's a lot going on and there's a lot to unpack, but it feels very like easy to read and enjoyable. As with most long books that I read, even if I really enjoy them, I do often think that they can be a bit too long, and there were a couple of characters that I wish we'd had more from, so that kind of kept it from like a real like 5-star experience, I suppose. But I do think it's a great book and I really loved it. Next I read The Deep by River Solomon. This I also listened to on audiobook. I obviously have it, but I listened to the audio. It's a very short audiobook. It's only like 4 hours or something. So this is about a community of creatures living in the sea called Wujinru, who are descended from the children of African enslaved women who were pregnant and then thrown overboard in the Atlantic Ocean, and then their unborn children become Wujinru, which is a kind of concept that, wow, this book is interesting, its kind of development, because that concept was developed by some other artists and then kind of built upon, and then River Solomon built on all of, like, I think there was several songs and playlists that came from that kind of concept, and then River Solomon like took that concept and built on it to make this little novella. And you mainly follow one of the Wujinru called Yetu. She's what they call the historian, which basically is a role in the kind of community of one person who takes on all of the memories of the entire people and holds them for everybody else. So none of the other Wujinru know their kind of past, where they've come from, all of the kind of horrors that they have endured over the centuries. They are all held by one person. So it's about the struggle between wanting to remember your past and your heritage, and also not wanting to carry the pain of that, and whether it's better to forget what you've been through and what all your people have been through, or if you need to hold on to it and value it and preserve it. And I found that very interesting. The one thing that kind of prevented me from fully loving this, I think, was just the writing style was not for me. Like, it's quite simplistic in the sense that it reads like a kind of folk tale, and that is obviously deliberate. Like it's very much it very much reads like a kind of fable, or a sort of, yeah, like folklore and like a folktale. Like, that's because that's kind of what it is. And I understand why it was written like that. It just kind of prevented me from enjoying it fully. But I did still like this, and I think the concept is really interesting, and you know, it's how it explored that concept and this, you know, the idea of this people was really done well, but yeah, just not my favourite kind of writing style. Then I read The Cloisters by Katy Hayes. This I also listened to and didn't love very much. This is kind of similar to The Beholders in why I didn't like it. Basically, it's about a woman called Anne who is an academic, and she basically ends up working in this museum in New York called the Cloisters. She wasn't expecting to be working there, but like she ends up there, and kind of it's a beautiful place with like lots of art and gardens and like and various different mysterious staff members that she kind of becomes a bit obsessed with. And there's a mysterious deck of old tarot cards that maybe mean something more. Someone gets murdered halfway through, so there's that. There's a kind of like, then, oh, what could be happening? Like, we're all so tight-knit, and why is someone now getting murdered out of nowhere? And the kind of intrigue from that. And you can probably tell already from how I'm talking about the plot, but this very much fell short for me. Like, it's very much trying to be, I think, an aesthetic and a kind of a vibe, which is something that people really want at the moment. That kind of dark academia, like intrigue, mystery, like weird, cool, intellectual people doing kind of dark, creepy things, and you know, kind of tight-knit, close group of people. Basically the secret history. Everyone has been trying to do the secret history for years now, but nobody's doing it. Nobody is doing the secret history or anything that comes close to it, and it's really frustrating. And when I say, like, you know, this is trying to be an aesthetic, what I mean is, like, I saw a video on Instagram which was like recommending this book, and it was, you know, it was like, oh, do you want this? And then it showed, you know, a bunch of like pictures, like Pinterest photos of this kind of dark academia aesthetic of like tarot cards, like columns and mysteriousness and like ink blots and candles, and like, and then was like, you know, the Cloisters. And it's like, that's not enough for a book to rely on. Like, it can't just be an aesthetic, and people want a book that takes them into that world. I kind of take back what I just said, that a book can't just be an aesthetic, because sometimes it can be, if the writing is good enough, and if it is beautifully done and really takes you into it. Like, a lot of the reason that I love The Picture of Dorian Gray is because it's so gorgeously written, and it's so luxuriant and beautiful, and it really takes you into that world of like darkness and corruption and beauty. And also the plot is fucked, and the characters are great. Like, there's other stuff, but a lot of the reason I love it is because it really takes you into that world and that, I guess, aesthetic. But if you are trying to do that and you are not Oscar Wilde or Don Tart, it doesn't work. I feel like I'm being really harsh now and having a rant, but it just, it frustrates me, because it feels like people are publishing books that are just fine, and then, you know, publishers going nuts over them and trying to promote them as, like, you know, to kind of profit off this sort of thing that people want, which is dark academia and, you know, no plot, just vibes, like, kind of book. But the actual books aren't doing that. They're not delivering that. Like with the Cloisters, it is no plot, just vibes, but the vibes aren't there. Like, it's not good enough for it just to rely on the vibes, but then also the plot isn't interesting enough for it to rely on the plot. So at the end, you just get a very bland, nothingy kind of book where, you know, there's a mystery that is sort of half-baked, and an aesthetic kind of atmosphere that is also very half-baked, and you end up with nothing. Like, you know, you reach the end, and I literally felt like, okay, that was a book. I read it. Full stop. And like I say, I think this is mostly the fault of publishers putting out books that they know that people will make a video about, where they say, oh look, isn't this aesthetic? You should read it. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Sorry about the rant. This has been bothering me for a while, and I am tired of reading mediocre historical fiction and like mysterious, kind of slightly ghosty books that just don't live up to any kind of expectation. Because I love those kinds of books. I love them. When they're done really well, they're my favourite to read. And I feel like I've just read so many at this point that are just meh, and I'm tired of it, and I wish people would stop publishing them. Anyway, moving on. I don't know how long I ranted for there, but it was long enough, so I'm sorry. But we're going to end the month on a high, because I read Poor Things by Alasdair Gray, and I loved this so much. So obviously the film has come out. I have been meaning to read this for ages, like years at this point, but finally, you know, wanting to read the book before I watched the film really gave me the kick up the ass to actually do it. So I finished the book about 3 days before I went to see the film. I don't want to talk too much about the film. Basically, I also love the film. It's very different from the book, but it's an excellent adaptation in that it changes things and, you know, adapts the story to a new medium. This is set up in a kind of, I guess, like postmodern metafiction kind of way, where it's framed as Alasdair Gray has found these documents relating to a man called Archibald McCandless and his wife Victoria McCandless, or Bella Baxter she was previously known, and basically he's like edited them and gives historical notes and other different things like that. So there are two very distinct parts to the main bulk of this book. One of them is a kind of autobiography as written by Archie McCandless about his wife. And his wife was created, I guess, from a woman who jumped off a bridge and died, and then a doctor called Gwen Baxter, who is a medical student, friend of Archie, kind of finds her and takes the unborn child from her womb and puts the brain of the unborn child in the adult body and reanimates her, and as a kind of science experiment. And the second half, you get Victoria McCandless, as she kind of calls herself. She is Bella, Archie's wife. You get her kind of letter to her future descendants, basically saying that none of the stuff that Archie wrote about her is true, and that she didn't particularly like him, and a bunch of other stuff where she kind of twists the whole narrative that he's just given you and kind of reclaims it for herself. And the way this kind of weaves together like fact and fiction and presents itself as a real situation, but also has all these different competing perspectives on what's happening and what's real, just is so fun and fascinating. And I know that I will reread this and enjoy it so much more. But yeah, it's such a unique book and I'm so glad I've read it. I think I'm going to read Lanark at some point, which is his first book, and I'm very excited about that. But yeah, I would highly recommend this, or if you don't feel like reading it, do go and see the film, because they are both brilliant, and both kind of stand alone, separately or together. So those are all books I read in January. It was a pretty good month. If you've read any of these, please let me know. I would love to discuss them with you in the comments. I'm sorry if this video is super long. I really can get going when I want to. So I'm sorry. But I hope you enjoyed and I will see you soon.